Hello and welcome back. In today's recording, we will be doing a deep dive into the customization of print forms in SAP Logistics Management. To be more specific, we will be looking at how we can customize a label that we are going to affix on a parcel or shipment that we are going to be dispatching to one of our customers. On the left-hand side, we see our starting point, which is the SAP standard out-of-the-box label that you can, of course, use if it meets your requirements. On the right-hand side, we have the label that we will endeavor to customize to meet our specific requirements. What we will have to do in this particular form is to, number one, add a new field, which is representative of the dimensions of the parcel that we are shipping. And the specifics of this particular field, as you can see, is that it is going to be made up of 1, 2, 3, 4 different pieces, different fields of information that are also available in our form. These 4 dimensions being the height, the width, the length, as well as the unit of measure. But instead of having 4 different fields represented on the form, we are going to combine them into just one by using the scripting capabilities of Adobe Livecycle Manager. The next field that we will add will be this QR code, which is going to be a dynamic QR code, meaning that it's not just going to be leading a user to, for example, our website, but it will be leading him to our website and also concatenated or dynamically generated on the fly by appending the consignment number to it. Meaning that this particular customer, once they receive their shipment, they have the ability to scan the QR code and leave us a rating on our website, for example. But of course, we want to know what the consignment number is, so that if the customer is going to leave us a poor rating, we know that we have to do some kind of customer service follow-up action with this customer. And then the next thing that we will do is we will add an image, which in this case is going to be a static image representing a forklift, so that the handler knows that they should really be handling this parcel with a forklift due to the possible weight of the item. Before we dive into Adobe Livecycle Manager and see how we customize this form from a technical point of view, let's start off by looking at SAP Logistics Management itself and see what we are working with. So the first thing that I want to highlight is that we are here in the print template rule set for warehouse, which is, if you like, a decision table that is going to, at runtime, allow the system to determine what is the label that it should be spitting out that we should then be affixing on the parcel going out the door. We may have different labels for different requirements. For example, based on the language, based on the geographical destination, or also because we are working with a carrier that has imposed on us a very specific format. In this case, that is what is going to apply in our scenario, in that we have this carrier that we are working with, and they have dictated to us the label format that we should be using whenever we use them to ship the products to our customers. So this decision table here is very, very simple. It's essentially saying that whenever we have a shipment that is assigned to this carrier, and when the document that we are considering is a handling unit shipping label that is coming out of our warehouse L10, then we should be using the print template ZPRE-HU shipping label EN that is indicated here. Now this particular print template here is nothing more than a print template that we have also defined in SAP Logistics Management and looks as it is here. So obviously we have that technical name, which is the one that we had referenced in our decision table, but more importantly is also here the form template. Now this .xdp file is the one that we shall manipulate in Adobe Livecycle Designer. Now I have already taken care of copying the standard SAP out-of-the-box shipping label form template, print template, into my own customer namespace. And I've also already downloaded the SAP form template onto my local drive. To download this form, which is going to be the starting point for my customization, all I really have to do is simply click on it, and this is going to trigger the download of it onto my local downloads folder. Also of note, something that came in the latest March 5th, I believe, update is that we have within the print template a preview of this form, which is of course quite helpful to make sure that the form template that you have referenced here is really the one that you want to work with. And then obviously you can have a view of it. So let's go ahead, and for the purposes of doing a before and after differentiation, we are going to start off by packing and printing the label of one such item that we are trying to ship. Now here, as the starting point, we will be using the standard SAP form out-of-the-box template. So the first thing that I want to do here in the packing application is to line up a handling unit that is going to be using the Euro pallet as the packaging material. And here I have my handling unit number, and all I really need to do is pick the item or items that I want to pack in this handling unit. I'm going to click on pack selected, which is going to then obviously put those items in my packaging, my handling unit. And once I'm content with having completed and finalized what is going to go into this particular packaging, onto this particular pallet, I simply need to click print label, which is going to do two things. It's number one, going to close this handling unit, and it's also going to print the label. But before I do that, I'm going to edit the dimensions of it, and I'm going to say that this pallet is, say, 59 kilos, and it is going to be 120 centimeters in height. I click on OK, and I print the label to close and print the label. Handling unit number is 1601. And now that the handling unit is closed, it's moved on to the closed bucket in my packing application. So let's go and look at this form now. What does it look like for this particular handling unit? And to do this, we go to the Monitor Handling Unit application, and we will enter the unit, the number of the handling unit, and we click on Open File to see what the label looks like. So this is the standard SAP label that is relevant to the items that we have just packed and printed the label for. So this will be our starting point. We are now going to shift gears and go into Adobe Livecycle Designer. Let's go ahead and open our form, which we have placed into our working directory. So our working directory is this one here, Block Print ALD, and you can recognize here the name, which is the SAP form. So I'm just going to open it, and before I do anything, I'm going to first start off by saving it in a different name, and I'm going to call this ZPREB for blog, for example. So I'm just going to save it, but I now know that I'm working in my customized form. That way, if I mess it up too much and I need to start fresh again from the standard SAP one, I've got it ready to go. Now here we have a scripting pane that is available to us in Adobe Livecycle Designer, which we are going to use, but for the sake of having more real estate, I'm just going to close it for now. So on the left-hand side here, we can see a number of tabs. We've got the hierarchy, which is effectively showing me all of the objects and fields that are currently in use in my form. And you can see here that you can recognize the SAP standard form. Obviously, we don't see the information such as the barcodes, but we can see those big lines here, which we know corresponds to the barcodes. Let me just quickly bring up the form again. We can see here the barcodes from the SAP form, which are down here at the bottom. So what you can also do if you want to understand a little bit more about a particular field, where the information is coming from, for example, then what you could do is you could, I'm going to pick, for example, the consignment. And here we have, because we have selected it, we have a number of connected selections that are made in the other panes and sections of the screen. So as you can see, because I've selected this field, it's also being highlighted here on the left in the hierarchy of fields that are in my form. And then on the right hand side, here I have a number of fields that are now also appearing and showing me information that is specific and relevant to the field that I have selected. And we can see based on the caption that in this case it matches, right? So we can see consignment. Importantly also is, for example, the binding. The binding is effectively saying, well, logistics management is going to communicate with the print form via an OData service. And the OData service is going to be the vehicle of information between LGM and the print form. And our developers have effectively said, well, we have an OData service that is going to be serving this form, and the consignment field will be providing as logically the consignment information. Now, I could also change it, for example, if I was to say, well, I like the SAP form, but for me, the consignment number, I don't really care. I don't have any use for it. I'm going to use something else. You could then obviously simply use the list or the menu that is available there to select a different field. So, for example, you could say, well, I don't want to have the consignment number in there. I want to put in the handling unit number, as an example. But I'm going to keep the consignment because that fits me just very nicely. Now, most of the things that I'm going to be doing in this form are going to be concentrated down at the bottom. Now, you could also start to see that there are some, obviously we've got those big lines here that we recognize as being the barcodes, but we can also see these boxes here. And when we look at the form, we don't really see any information being printed here. So you might say, well, what is this all about? Well, these are effectively invisible fields that the form uses, manipulates to print in other sections of the form. So if I was to, as an example, select this particular field here, I would see that this field, which is invisible, I don't see it on the form, is actually bound to the OData and the field gross weight. So this is actually the field that provides to me the gross weight information for that particular handling unit. But then you might say, well, let's hang on. Why do I have this field here that is actually giving me the gross weight, but I can see that I've got this other field up here that is also showing me the gross weight and is actually being printed on the form. So if I go back to now selecting this field gross weight, I can see that in terms of binding, there is nothing there. And that obviously means that whatever value I get into this part of the form, so the gross weight that is here, is not the field that is raw from the OData service. And one thing that we can notice is that here we have obviously a number, which is the gross weight, as well as a unit of measure. So maybe you can already kind of start to see that it makes sense that even if we don't at this point see it yet, understand that there is something happening that is in this field combining the gross weight as well as the unit of measure. So let's see, if we pick this field here, we can see that this is bound to weight unit of measure, which is also being delivered from the OData service to this form. So the gross weight that we see here is, as I said, the concatenation of these two fields. Now, all the magic that I'm going to be doing in this form, and what we're going to be doing is we are going to be adding an image, we are going to be adding a QR code, And we are going to also be adding a field that concatenates the length, width, height of the package into one field so that we can show the dimension of the entire handling unit. But we have all of the fields here, which I don't really need to see, and they are invisible to the form anyway. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm not going to delete them, because obviously I might still be using them, in particular the gross weight as well as the unit of measure, because I have no plans on removing the gross weight from my form. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this subform, which groups together all of these fields that we see here that are effectively multiple invisible fields. And what I'm going to do in this subform, we can see here, so I've selected this subform, which then also is highlighted in the graphical representation of the form. And we can see here that it is flagged as being invisible, meaning it's invisible to the eye when it's going to get printed. But what I want to do is I'm going to say I'm going to hide it completely, so it's excluded from the layout, so it doesn't interfere with my redesigning, if you like, of this particular print form. But the fields, as you can see, they are still there. And I could, of course, bring these fields right back if I wanted or needed to. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is, and again, this is just for the sake of this particular recording, I will be removing one barcode. And I'm going to remove this first one here, and I'm just going to keep the last two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the field which represents the barcode, and I'm also going to delete the field that represents the character version of the barcode. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to add a field that is going to be representative of the dimension of the handling unit. So as I said, we will have the length times the width times the height being shown. So it's effectively three fields that we are going to need to be able to convey this information on the form. So let's go ahead and here we have this block. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to bring it down a little bit for the time being, which pushes down all the rest of the information. Now, the first thing that I'm going to show you is, as you can see here, we have all of these fields that already have a specific kind of formatting, whereby we can see the label of the box that is in a particular font, a particular size, particular weight. And rather than me trying to mess around with all of the tools that are available to me, although you could do this as well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this field here, gross weight, and I'm going to go and duplicate that field. So now I have a new field called gross weight, which I am going to position where I want it to be on my form. Now, this is also going to be a field that's going to be somewhat longer because it's going to have the length, the width by the height. So I can also extend that field to the full length of the form. Now, I also have this bold line that seems to indicate the end of the text field, so I'm going to bring this one down just below the gross weight. That is going to become the dimension. Here we go. And what I will also do is duplicate this thinner line and bring it just below the gross weight so that we keep the form intact in terms of formatting with respect to the lines that we have. So the first thing that I'm going to do now is I'm just going to change the name of the field that is here. So from gross weight, I'm going to call it dimensions. And what you can do to change this, you can simply select, double click on the field, and you can type in dimensions. And to be a bit more specific, we will say that what we will do is we will have the height times the width times the length. And I also want to make this part here a bit less prominent. So what I will do is I'm just going to select it. I'm going to go into the font and I'm going to put in the size of, say, 7, and I'm also going to remove the bold weighting on it. Let's go back and collect our field, go to the object, let's go to binding, and we can see here also that there is no data binding, which is good because we are going to be populating this field by concatenating the height, the width, and the length. What I'm also going to do here is I'm going to change the name of this particular field, which is really important because I will be referencing it, or if I do any scripting, this is the one that will be referenced. So I'm going to say txt, so I'm going to keep the same naming convention as what the SAP developers have been using, and I'm going to say txt dimension. So I know that this is just a text with the dimensions, and there's, as I said, no data binding either. So as I said, I now need to use the height, width, and length information that is provided to me by the OData to the form and concatenate those three into this particular field. But I still need to obviously get those three fields in my form, in my hierarchy of fields available in my form. So to do this, I'm going to go over to the data view. And the data view is now going to show you all of the fields that are available in your form as supplied by the OData. Because you could have a lot more fields being conveyed or provided to you in the OData that you really do want to use. So point in case, or case in point I should say, is the height, the length, and the width, which I believe is a little bit further down, are available here in the data view, so as supplied by the OData, but they're not currently used by my form. So how do I get those fields into this form? So there's different ways of doing it. One thing that you could, for example, do is you could drag a field into the form and then use the data binding to bind it to the OData. But another quick way of doing it is to go by the data view, and as I said, I'm going to use the height. So I'm just going to take it and drag it into my form, and you can see that it is now in my form. Now obviously the formatting is kind of all wrong and adapted to forms where you might potentially type in the information, but in my case I'm going to have it automatically populated by the OData service. Now the good thing here is that because I've directly dragged and dropped the form from the data view into my form, we can see that the binding is correct. So it's already correctly bound to the height of my OData service. There are some additional things that you might want to do to make it a little bit different, or maybe I'll just touch on this in case you did want to have this field appear in your form in the same kind of format as the other fields that you've got. So as I said, you don't want this to be a field where somebody can actually enter information because you're going to be providing it to the OData. So here I'm going to say in terms of appearance, I want it to be a sunken, oops, I'm going to say none, my apologies. And then also you might want to have the actual content of the field below the text height. And for that, what we would do is we would go to the layout and we would say that the position is going to be on top. So now we have the height and the information that would be served by the OData then at the bottom. I'm going to drag in the other fields that I need. So it's going to be the length. Okay, so obviously dragging all of these fields is taking up a lot of room. So I'm just going to, but I'm going to remove them in a moment anyway. But I'll leave them here just for a second. So I'm going to apply the same formatting here. Let's have a quick check on the binding, just to make sure that it's correctly bound, which is the length, which is great. And then in terms of layout, I'm going to say I want it at the top as well. I will also make this field a little bit smaller. And then the last one that I need is the width, which is, here we go, down here. So same thing, I will drag it into my form. I will also quickly do the formatting the way I need it to be. Double check the binding to width and do a representation of none as well. Now these fields, as I said, I don't need to see them on my form, so I'm going to go back to the hierarchy, and what I will do is I will, from a visibility, from a presence point of view, I'm going to, just like the other fields that I did earlier on, I'm going to hide them, so exclude them from the layout. But as you can see, they are still obviously in my hierarchy of fields, so I can absolutely use them. So I'm just going to hide them from the layout. So I'm back now to my starting point where I did my cleanup. I've added my fields, but I've nicely and neatly tucked them out of sight from my form. So now this is where we have to proceed with the magic of how do we get that information in there. Oh, no, sorry, I actually forgot one more thing, which is the unit of measure. So the unit of measure code, obviously my package is going to have different dimensions, which could be in centimeters, meters, whatever it is that we are using, or maybe inches, depending on the geography. So I'll do the same thing here. I'm going to drag and drop the unit of measure code, and I will apply the same kind of formatting. So I'm going to say none. I'm going to quickly check on the binding, which is the correct field. I'm going to put it on top, and same thing, I will just say that I want this one, oops, my apologies, I'm going to, in the field object, say that I want to put that as a hidden field. Okay, so I go back to my hierarchy. All right, now we have everything. We've got the height, the length, the width, and the unit of measure code. So we need to have the magic of getting that information in here. So this is where we are going to use some scripting magic. So I'm going to open up this particular pane, which gives me access to the scripting of events. I'm going to select the field for which I want to add some scripting, and we can see that the script field automatically becomes open for input. Now you'll notice that there is already some code in here, and there are different codes that you can put for different purposes. By that I mean that, for example, you could put some code to initialize a value, to validate a value, and now obviously the code that we see here applies to the field gross weight, which is the one that we use to create our dimensions field. So this code is really not going to be applying to us, so we can delete it. And before we do delete it, I quickly want to also open up here and highlight the fact that the event for which we have been maintaining this code, and for which we will also need to maintain something similar for the dimension build-up, is an event of type calculate, which is denoted by the star. So effectively it means that for the event calculate, we have some code that is maintained. We could also have this star for other events. I'm just going to select calculate, and I am going to delete this part of the code, which applies to the dimensions field, which, as I said earlier, is the one that we want to get rid of because it applies to gross weight. So I'm going to simply hit delete, and I've gotten rid of that particular code. Now I'm going to add some code that is going to be specific to my dimensions field, and I've already prepared some code, so I'm going to just paste it. And essentially we have now added some code that is specific to our field. And what we're saying is, well, number one, we're doing a check on the height field, which is relevant because that is one that is going to be used in my dimensions field. And effectively what we're saying is that, well, if we don't have the height information, then we want the field value for dimensions to be a simple dash. But if not, then we want to build up the full concatenation of height, width, length, and unit of measure. Now, you could also, for the sake of completeness, add additional checks to say, well, what happens if I have the height but not the width, or the height and width but not the length? It really is up to you, right? You could also, for example, say, well, if I have one particular field missing, I'll just put a dash in lieu of it. It really is up to you. But this is what we are going with. So what we are saying is that we will want to effectively concatenate. We're not using the concatenate command, which is also possible in the scripting of Adobe Livecycle forms, but this will do for us nicely. And what we're saying is we want to effectively create a string that is going to put together the height value from the OData plus an X plus the width plus the length plus the unit of measure, and obviously an X in between every time. Now, another thing that I quickly want to show you, because sometimes you might have some problems because you might do typos, and sometimes finding these typos can be like looking for a needle in a haystack. So what you could also do if you did not want to type the field in there yourself, so I'm just going to delete the length field, and for my next trick I will need to bring the length field back into the form. So let me just quickly do that. If I can, here we go. And so I'm just going to bring the field back visible into the form. Let's go back to dimension, and I'm going to position myself here. So instead of typing the field name that you want to add into your script, what you can do is you can position yourself in the script where you want this field to be, and then go back onto the form, click the Control key on your keyboard, and you can see that as you hover over a particular field, you have this V icon cursor that is showing up, which effectively is saying, insert. So if I now click on length, you can see that the name of that field has been automatically added into my script. And what it has done is it has added not just the name of the field, but it's also added the form, the subform in which it is, which is also really helpful for the sake of completeness, to make sure that from a hierarchy, a navigation point of view, you're specific about where you are getting this particular value. So I'm just going to leave it as is, but if I really wanted to be clean about all of this, I probably would want to add the subform name for all of the other fields as well. Now I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to once again put this one as hidden so that it is excluded from the layout. Okay, great. So now this has taken care of my dimensions field. Now the next thing that I want to do, and I'm just going to make the scripting window a little bit smaller to give me a bit more real estate. Now I'm going to come down here at the bottom, and the next thing that I want to do here is I want to add a QR code. And the scenario for this is going to be that on the labels we want to print a QR code that the user, once they receive the parcel, they can scan the QR code and go onto our website and leave us a rating on how well we did. What did the package arrive on time? Was it damaged? Whatever the case may be. So I'm going to again pick up my form block, and I am going to shift it way up just below my dimensions, and I also need a little bit more room. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the size of the barcode. So I'm going to go to layout for that, and I'm going to say that I want that to be 10, and I'll do the same thing on this one. So I'm going to say 10. Okay, so I've got a bit more room to work here down at the bottom. So to add a barcode or any other object, there's a few things that you can do. As I said, you can use the palettes that are available here on the right. You can simply take an object and then drag and drop it. Obviously, it has to be relevant. Putting a button is not super relevant in this case on a print form. We also have barcodes here. We have a whole array of possibilities depending on the type. So it's a code 128 or an Aussie Australia Post standard. But what we want is a QR code. The other way that you could do it is you could also go via the insert menu, and you also have here the possibility to filter or navigate down through the various barcodes that are available. Whatever floats your boat. In my case, I'm just going to drag this QR code object again into my form, and I'm going to make it a little bit smaller just so that it fits nicely below my barcodes. So I've got this object that is a QR code, barcode, and I need to now tell it how, what information is it that we are going to be using when the person scans the barcode. Now, it could be something really simple like a static value, a website, but in our case, it's going to be dynamic, right? Because what we want to do is we obviously want to provide a URL to our website, but we want the person to be able to leave a rating that is specific to the package that they received, right? So we have to add, for example, in this case, the consignment number to the URL that will be provided by this QR code. And so for that, we are once again going to need a field for which we are going to do some similar magic to what we did with the dimensions. So I'm going to close up the barcodes, and this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to, instead of doing a copy or duplicate of an existing field, just to show you a different way of doing these things, I'm going to drag and drop a text field into my form. I will apply, for the sake of completeness, like I did before, simply add the same kind of formatting. And I'm going to rename my object. I'm going to call this full URL name. So this field is now called full URL name. Whenever I want to include it in a script, this is the name that I can use. But obviously I'm going to make it a bit clearer on the form as well, even though this field will be made invisible as well from the form. I'm just going to call it here tracking, for example. Hope it doesn't like that. Tracking. Okay, I'm going to call it tracking. So now I need to add some similar magic to what we did with the dimensions field to concatenate a fixed portion of the URL of the QR code, if you like, which is going to be the URL plus the consignment. So again, selecting my field tracking so that I know that the scripting window that I see here at the top is relevant for my field, and you can see here that it is for full URL name. What we're going to do here is I'm going to again use some code that I have prepared. So the event type that we need to add is similar to the dimensions field, going to be an event of type calculate. Another thing that I did not mention before, but I will mention now, is that when you do your scripting, you have the ability to pick and choose between one of two coding languages, which is FormCalc or JavaScript. I'm now going to be using JavaScript, which is the same language as what we had used for the dimensions field. And also just know that you can access functions by clicking on this particular icon. For example, if you needed to concatenate something and you weren't sure what the syntax of it was, and you can also do a syntax check once you have entered your code. So as I said, I've got some ready to go code for this particular field. Let me just make the scripting window a little bit bigger. Okay, and so here it is effectively saying that if we don't have the consignment number in the form, then we're just going to put the raw value to dash. Actually, what we could also do is add on the QR code a presence check to see that if the full URL name is not filled, then we don't even print the QR code. But anyway, let's move on. So what we're saying here is that the code that the QR code will relay when it is scanned is going to be made up of two parts, which is the fixed URL of our website, which is in this case a non-existent website called fakecouriers.com. Tracking ID equals the consignment number, which is this field here. So obviously when the person scans the QR code, theoretically it would then open up the website fake courier tracking ID equal the consignment number, and the customer would be invited to share a rating, maybe a comment. But in any case, what we're trying to highlight here is that we are doing something that is very specific. The rating that we will get will be for this particular consignment number. Okay, so this is the code for the full URL name field. So again, I'm just going to quickly hide my scripting window, and this tracking field, which I don't really need to see, I am going to do the same thing as before. I'm just going to hide it from view, but as you can see, it is still obviously available here. Now, when you do your testing, you may also decide to leave the field visible for the purpose of testing, just to make sure or check what it is that is coming through into it. Okay, so now we have defined what the content of that QR code should be. So the last step that we need to do is to connect the QR code field, which is this one, the QR code per se, with the full URL name, which is the field that actually holds the value that the QR code has to read. And to do this, we are again going to be using some scripting magic to do that. So I will once again open up the scripting window, and what you can see is that the calculate method is not an event that is available for the QR code object type. And in this case, we are in lieu going to be using a different kind of event, which is layout ready, and that will also do the trick. And again, I've got my code that is ready to go. And what we will do here is I'm just going to copy paste this particular piece of code. And essentially what it is doing or saying is, so the dollar indicator effectively means this field. So this object is going to be equal to full URL name. And also don't forget to append the field with .raw value. Or it could also be, you might have done some special formatting to it, but if you just put full URL name, chances are the output that you will get will not be the one that you expect or desire. So don't forget to add raw value after your field name. Okay, so this is now taken care of, the QR code. Then the next kind of field that we might want to put into our form might be a picture. Again, this could be a logo of your company. It could be an icon to designate that it's a fragile parcel, or that it contains electronics, whatever the case may be. So what we are going to do here is we are going to find the image object in our object library palette, and what we will do, we will again drag and drop this into our form. We'll adapt the size so that it is just below our barcodes. And the next thing that we want to do for this field here is obviously say what is the image that we want to have in there. So in the object palette on the draw tab for the object of type image, we can go into our folder structure and navigate to the image that we want to put in there. Or we could also obviously put a URL, which might also be something that works. So I'll go to desktop, I'll go to my folder where I've got the image, and I'm just going to open it. And as you can see here, it's just a very simple basic image of a forklift. Lastly, the next thing that we want to add is just a text field. Now there could be some static text field that you want to add. So I'm just going to drag and drop the text object, and just so that customers understand what this QR code is going to be about, we are going to, for example, say that this is to select the text. I'm just double clicking in on the field. I'm going to paste my text, and I want to have the text, how did we do? And what we'll do is we'll say scan the QR code and rate us. Now obviously this is a little bit too big in terms of font size, so I go to the fonts. I'm going to make that a little bit smaller, maybe an 11 size font, and you can do some additional formatting, whatever it is that you want to do. So I'm also going to pick a different font. I'm going to go with Arial. Make the font a little bit smaller, and here we go. That way people, when they get to see this QR code, they'll know what it's for. Okay, so I think that from here we are okay. I think we've defined all the fields that we wanted to define. So quickly, just to recap, we've added this dimension, which is the concatenation of the height, the width and the length and the unit of measure. We've added this image, we've added this QR code, which is also going to have a URL that is dynamically built, and we've added this little static text on our form so that people knew what this QR code was all about. So I'm going to save my form. I'm going to get out of Adobe Livecycle Designer. I'm going to close my form. Okay, so now that we have finished the customization of our form, the first thing that we want to do is we want to upload the customized XDP file back into SAP Logistics Management. So I'm already here in the print template. I'm just going to quickly edit and then browse to find the new file, which is this one. I will upload it, and already we should see the preview starting to change and look like the one that we have just changed. Here we go. We can see the image, the QR code, and obviously now what we want to do is we want to see if it does actually print with all the details that we would have wanted to see on the form. So what we'll do is we'll go back to the packing center, and the handling unit that we had previously created, we are going to reopen it. And let's go to the open buckets. We'll pick it, we will unpack, and we will then delete the handling unit because we want to create a new one. So just like before, I'll create a new one by lining up the packaging material that I want to use, which is again going to be a pallet. So we have our new handling unit number 1602, and just like before, I will select my cargo and pack it into my handling unit, which is updated. I'll put in the weight information and dimension. So I can't remember what we had, but I'll put in, say, 98 kilos, and I'll put in 120 for the height of the package. So just like before, I will print the label, which will close and print at the same time. And the handling unit number is 1602. So now that is done, we go back to the handling unit application and call up the 1602 handling unit, bring up the details, and just like before, we open up the file and let's see what it brings us. Let me try it and make it a little bit bigger so we can see that we have all the details that we wanted. So we've got obviously the dimension that is correctly bringing the 3 dimensions of the height, width and length, as well as the unit of measure. We can also see our QR code, but we don't know yet if it is correctly taking us to the website so that we can track or rate the consignment, and we also have the image. So if we do a quick before and after comparison, this was how it was before, and this is what it looks like now. So the last thing that we need to do now is just check to see if the QR code does actually take us to the website that we want to. Has the QR code generated a dynamic URL? And we now have the moment of truth test, which is to see if our QR code has essentially provided the user with a dynamically generated QR code. So let's see. Let's move in and let's try to scan the label. Here we go, it's picked up the QR code. Now already here at the top you can see the URL, which is fakecourier.com. We'll open it up in the Safari browser to see the entire hyperlink, and we can see it is fakecourier/tracking ID equals the number of the consignment number. So it does confirm that the URL associated with the QR code was dynamically generated, so all is well.